Thank you for the introduction. Once again, my name is Jeen Min, and I will be discussing Prescription Drug User Fee Act for waivers, exemptions, and refunds. Oh my. My team is involved in two user fee programs, the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, known as PDUFA, and the Biosimilar User Fee Act. But today I'll be only going over PDUFA user fee program. Some topics I'll be discussing. I'll be going over some of the background information, providing some history on PDUFA, where it comes from, and what authority it gives FDA. I'll explain the different types of fees that are currently under PDUFA. I'll be going over when and how fees are collected. Then I'll talk about waivers, exemptions, and refunds, the different types, and what criteria in order to qualify for them. And then I'll explain some of the technical administrative aspects of where, when, and what to submit. So, some background information on PDUFA. If you're unfamiliar with it, please know it comes from the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, specifically from Section 735 and 736. PDUFA 1 was first enacted in 1992, approximately 27 years ago. And it must be reauthorized every 5 years. This is where FDA gets the authority to collect fees. As I mentioned, PDUFA is reauthorized every 5 years. This slide provides some information on the different PDUFA acts and which fiscal years it applied to. Currently, we are in PDUFA 6, the Food, Drug Administration Reauthorization Act, known as FDARA. It was signed into law on August 18, 2017, and it lasts until fiscal year 2022. Now that I provided some brief background, I would like to mention that for certain human drug products and biologic products, which are mainly under two centers, the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, known as CDER, and the Center for Biologic Evaluation and Research, known as CBER. For human drug products, they are submitted usually in new drug applications known as NDAs, sometimes referred to as 505(b)(1) or 505(b)(2). And for biological products, they are submitted under Biologic License Application, known as BLAs, or sometimes referred to as 351A. The types of fees. Now that I provided some background on PDUFA, I'll be discussing the different types of fees. The reason why I'll be talking about the different types of fees, so you know what the fees are and what you're asking to waive. This will also provide some fundamental knowledge on the fee types, and I'll explain what they are. So, under PDUFA 6, there are two main fee types. There's the application fee, and there's the annual program fee. Every year, the target revenue that we try to collect, we collect approximately, for fiscal year 19, it's approximately $1 billion. 20% of it, the target revenue, comes from the application fee, and 80% comes from the program fees. For fiscal year 19, that means FDA has a target revenue to collect from application fees, approximately $200 million, and from the program fees, it's approximately $800 million. The target revenue is adjusted annually, and there is a formula that FDA uses. Since the target revenue changes annually, that means the rates change every year, and usually it's published in the FR notice in the beginning of August. As I mentioned, there are two types of fees. The first fee is the application fee. This fee is due upon submission of the application. So if FDA doesn't receive a payment by the firm by the time you submit the application, FDA will not accept the application. There are two different types of application fees. There's the full fee, and then there's the half a fee. For fiscal year 19, the full fee is about $2.6 million. and applies to applications that require clinical data for approval. For user fee purposes, bioavailability and bioequivalence studies are not considered clinical data. For HAP fees, it's about $1.3 million, which applies to applications that doesn't require clinical data. Please note I specifically bolded required for approval. Just because you don't submit clinical data to your application doesn't necessarily mean clinical data isn't required for approval. For example, a firm could submit an application with no clinical data, but later on during the process, maybe during filing, it's found that clinical data is needed in order to approve the application. This is when a firm probably has submitted only half a fee and now a full fee would be due. The next type of fee is the annual program fee. This fee is applied to the approved prescription drug product. Now, what do I mean by prescription drug product? That means a specific strength or potency of a drug in a final dosage form. This fee is due annually, so every year you should receive an invoice for the program fee. And it's due usually on October 1st of each fiscal year. Now, where would you find these? How do you know if you would be charged a program fee? Well, you would have to look up the prescription drug products. Usually, we have 3 different lists that you can look it up on. There's the Orange Book, there's the CDER Therapeutic Biologic Product List, and there's the CBER Billable Biologics List. This is all available online for your view. Important thing to remember, if you are on the marketed section of one of these lists, as of October 1st, you will be charged a program fee unless you move it to the discontinue section.
Thank you for your patience. We're reloading the slides. We had a slight internet hiccup. We'll take care of that, and we'll be right back with you.
Sorry for the interruption. So we left off at the program fees. These program fees are annual fee, and they are due usually October 1st of each fiscal year. And you can find the list of products in 3 different lists that are currently published online: the Orange Book, the CDER Therapeutic Biologics List, the CBER Billable Biologics List. And this is due. Currently for FY19, the program fees are approximately $300 million. Remember, when I say fiscal year, that applies to October 1st to September 30th. One thing I would like to point out is if you are on the annual fee is based on when you are on the marketed section of the list as of October 1st of each fiscal year. So, for example, if your prescription drug product is approved and on the list on or before October 1st of 2018, that means you would be charged a fee for fiscal year 19, most likely due on October 1st, 2018. But if your prescription drug product is approved on the list after October 1st of 2018, you will not be charged for fiscal year 2019. You basically will get a pass for the year, and your first annual program fee will be invoiced in fiscal year 20, which would be due on October 1st, 2019. So when it comes to annual program fees, are there any reasons why you would not be charged a fee? There are some exclusions. Once again, as I mentioned before, this is only the annual program fee only applies to approved marketed drug products. So if you are on the discontinued list and no longer marketing, you would not be charged a fee. Basically, as I mentioned before, if you are in the marketed section as of October 1st of that fiscal year, you will not be charged until the next fiscal year, and you must be off this list. Next reason why you might not be charged the annual program fee if you are a large volume parenteral product. What does that mean? That means if your product is an injection greater than 100 mLs. Now, this applies to most large volume parenterals, but there are some exceptions. For example, if you're a BLA that is a single dose injection, you would not be excluded from the annual program fee. Next reason why, if you're the same product as another product. This is only applicable to NDAs, and this information would be found in the Orange Book. Now, what do I mean as same product as another product? If you are therapeutically equivalent to another product, basically if you have an A rating and you are found that you're bioequivalent to another product without any issues. One other thing I would like to mention, we only charge the annual program fees for 5 products per application. What does that mean? Basically, if you had H eligible strengths within the application, a firm would only be charged for 5 program fees. Now, when do the annual program fees, when are you assessed? These are usually assessed twice a year. You would usually receive invoices. And with these billing cycles, we like the first one, we will call this the annual billing cycle. These invoices are issued usually in mid-August, and the fees are due on October 1st of the fiscal year. This is the main invoicing period. And then there is a smaller invoicing period, which we call up the cleanup billing cycle. These invoices are usually issued in mid-December and are due in mid-January. This illustration will hopefully provide a better understanding of the timeline of the different billing cycles. This is the timeline for the annual billing cycle. We start with the Dear Colleague letter, which is usually issued in the beginning of May. Think of the Dear Colleague letter as a draft invoice where we spell out what a firm could be charged for the next fiscal year. We usually ask firms to provide a response by the beginning of June. Now, June 30th is a very important date. Because of administrative processes to the invoice of annual program fees, the August invoice is usually based on June data. Why is that important? Well, if a firm doesn't want to be charged for a program fee and receive an invoice in August, and the firm must update the product list by June 30th. For example, when you receive the Dear Colleague letter in May and you know that you're not marketing a drug product anymore, you're responsible to get that list updated by June 30th. If it's not updated, you will receive an invoice in August, and you will have to ask for a refund for that invoice or ask for a waiver. As I mentioned in previous slides, the rates are published annually around the beginning of August. Once they are published, then we issue the invoice, usually sent out in mid-August. September 30th is another important date. We base the program fees off this product list. And as I mentioned before, you must be if you are discontinuing a product, you must be on the discontinued section before October 1st. So that way you would not be charged the annual program fee. We've had firms who didn't realize this and might have notified after the fiscal year starts. Unfortunately, the statute states that it is based upon the product list as of October 1st. So if you notify afterwards and you're not off the list, unfortunately, a firm will owe the fee then. And lastly, the payment is due on October 1st. This is a timeline for the cleanup billing cycle. It's much shorter. It does not have a Dear Colleague letter. Hopefully, you already received a Dear Colleague beforehand, and anything that is not mentioned during that time will have to be sent in the cleanups invoice. As I mentioned before, there's some of the administrative process where we base our information off of June data. That means between July 1st and October 1st, there might be some data that's missing. For example, if you got a new product approved in September, of course you wouldn't receive it in the August invoice because we've already sent it out. So we have to send out another invoice, which we call the cleanup invoice, and that is usually issued in mid-December. And we usually give you a 30-day time clock in order to pay, so it would usually be due in mid-January. Now, I'll be going over waivers, exemptions, and refunds. Currently, there are 2 waiver guidance available online. There's the old waiver guidance that was issued in September 2011, named User Fee Waivers, Reductions, and Refunds for Drug and Biological Products. This is an outdated waiver guidance. Please do not use it. There is a new draft guidance that was recently published last year in June 2018 called Prescription Drug User Fee Act, Waivers, Reductions, and Refunds for Drug and Biological Products. This is updated information and our new policy, so please make sure you use the new draft guidance. Do not use the old guidance. Unfortunately, until the draft guidance is finalized, both guidance are available online. I'll be going over orphan exemptions. Now, orphan exemptions may be applied to application fees. To qualify orphan exemptions, there are basically 2 rules. Your product must be designated for a rare disease. In addition, you cannot submit, your product can't be for an indication that's outside the scope of the rare disease or condition. When you submit your application and you have a rare disease and another indication that is not within the scope of the rare disease, it will not qualify for the orphan exemption for an application fee. The nice thing about the orphan exemption when it comes to application fees, you don't need to submit a request ahead of time. All you need to do is correctly market the information in the user fee cover sheet and make sure you mention it in the cover letter that you are submitting orphan exemption with your application. A brief statement will usually suffice. This is the only exemption/waiver that doesn't require a written request ahead of time. For all other waivers and exemptions, a written request must be submitted ahead of time and granted in order to use it. Of course, if you do not receive your orphan designation before the application is submitted, you do have the option of paying for the application fee. And if you do pay for the application fee, you will have to submit a request for a refund, though. Please note the distinction. So if you do not have the orphan designation by the time you submit it, you will need to ask for a refund. But if you do have it, you do not have to submit a written request, and you could just pretty much state that you are using an orphan exemption. Now, when it comes to annual program fees, for orphan exemptions, it may be applied to annual program fees. There are basically 2 rules that you need to follow. First rule is you must meet the public health waiver requirements. What does that mean? You have to have an orphan designation. Second part of it is there is a financial requirement. You must have less than $50 million in gross worldwide revenue, including affiliates, during the previous year. Now, you notice I bolded the term affiliates. What does FDA mean by affiliates? Basically, does one business entity control or has the power to control the other business entity? Or is there a third party that controls or has the power to control both business entities? That's what we mean by affiliates. And when it comes to orphan exemptions for the annual program fees, you must submit a request to FDA. I recommend you submit it prior to before the annual fee is due. Personally, I like tables. I think this provides a nice snapshot and quick information at a glance. Hopefully you agree. This table provides a summary of the orphan exemptions. For example, when it comes to application fees, you do not have to submit a written request prior, unless, of course, you already paid the fee and you need a refund. And then for orphan exemption, when it comes to application fees, you need an orphan designation, and it cannot be there cannot be any other indications besides orphan designation. There are no financial requirements, and the payment is usually due once. When it comes to the program fees, you do need to have a written request prior. It applies, and you need an orphan designation. There is a financial requirement of less than $50 million gross worldwide revenue, and this is an annual. This payment is due annually, so that means you will get an invoice annually. If you are granted an orphan exemption for the annual program fee for 1 year, that does not automatically mean you'll be granted for the next year. You must submit your request again every year. Now I'll be talking about waivers. There are three main types of waivers. There's the small business waiver. There is the public health waiver. And then there's the barrier to innovation waiver. Sometimes I will use the term BTI. Under the barrier to innovation waiver, there are subcategories of it. One is the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, known as PEPFAR. And then there's the positron emission tomography, known as PET. The small business waiver. The small business waiver only applies to application fees. It does not apply to annual program fees. And in order to qualify for the small business waiver, there are three main rules in order to meet the conditions. First rule is that you must have less than 500 employees, including employees of affiliates. Second rule, the applicant does not have a drug product that has been approved under a human drug application or introduced or delivered into interstate commerce. What does that mean? Basically, that means the firm does not have any PDUFA products that are currently being marketed. And the third rule is basically it must be your first human drug application that you are submitting. This includes affiliates. So some of you might have noticed I bolded affiliates in the first and third bullet, but I didn't bold it in the second bullet. That is not a mistake. The second rule is only applicable to the applicant. It does not apply to affiliates. That's how it's written in the statute. So that's the reason why it's only applicable to the applicant. When it comes to small business waiver, there is an expiration. If you are granted, it will usually expire after 1 year. So if you do not use it within 1 year, you must submit another request. It's expected within a year time period. Circumstances do change, so that's why there is a year expiration on the small business waiver. Another thing I would like to mention is that when it comes to the small business waiver, there is a form to fill out, Form FDA 3971, which is attached to the 2018 draft waiver guidance. It is the only waiver that currently has a form associated with it. Next type of waiver I'll be going over is the public health waiver. Unlike the small business waiver, where it only applies to the application fee, the public health waiver can be applied to both the application fee and the annual program fee. There are two main rules in order to qualify. First, the product must protect the public health. Then there is a financial condition. You must have limited resources of less than $20 million, including affiliates. Now, what do I mean by limited resources? For user-fee purposes, we usually generally consider working capital. FDA reviews current assets and current liabilities to determine if the applicant has limited resources. Some of you might be asking, how does FDA determine if my product is considered protects the public health? Well, I'll briefly go over some of the factors we take into consideration, but if you want more detail, please read over the 2018 draft waiver guidance. So, some of the factors we take into consideration. Is the product a significant improvement compared to or other marketed drug products? Does the product lack treatment or alternatives? Is the drug a priority drug? Was it granted fast track status, or is it a new molecular entity? Does it increase effectiveness in treatment, prevention, or diagnosis of a disease? Does it eliminate or substantially reduce a treatment-limiting drug reaction? Does it enhance patient adherence to treatment? Does the product potentially have evidence of safety and effectiveness for new or underserved subpopulation? Is it intended for the treatment of serious or life-threatening condition? Does it address unmet medical needs? Or is the drug an orphan drug? Now, please note, this is not an all-encompassing list. This mainly provides firms guidance on what factors FDA takes in consideration when they evaluate does it qualify for a public health waiver. There can be unique situations where other factors may be considered. Next is the barrier to innovation waiver. Just like the public health waiver, it applies to both application fees and annual program fees. And there are two main conditions to meet in order to qualify. First, does the product or products or technologies under development by the applicant are innovative? Next, just like the public health waiver, there is a financial requirement. It's the same financial requirement of having limited resources of less than $20 million, including affiliates. Similar to the public health waiver, there are considerations that FDA looks at, and I'll be going over them briefly, but if you want more detailed information, please look at the 2018 draft waiver guidance. First, is it advanced breakthrough research, new progressive methods, and or forward thinking in the treatment or diagnosis of disease? Does the innovation provide a potential to be a forefront of new medical technology? Is it considered unique or superior method for diagnosing, curing, mitigating, treating, or preventing a disease, or for affecting a structure or function of the body? Is it a priority drug? Was it granted fast track status, or is it a new molecular entity? Is the active IND under which evaluating a unique or superior method for diagnosing, curing, mitigating, treating, or preventing a disease, or for affecting a structure or function of the body? Has it recently received a federal grant for innovation? Once again, as I've said for public health waiver, these considerations are not all-encompassing. These just mainly to provide guidance, and there can always be other circumstances which we might take into consideration. When it comes to the barrier to innovation waiver, there are subcategories of it. The first one I'll be going over is the PEPFAR waiver. It stands for the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. As I said, this is a type of barrier to innovation waiver, and is only applicable to the application fee. Currently, there are two guidances for the PEPFAR waiver. There's the old final guidance, which was issued in February 2007. This is outdated. It's named User Fee Waiver for FDC and Co-Packaged HIV Drugs for PEPFAR. Please do not use the old guidance. Please refer to the new guidance, which was just issued last year of June 2018. The name of the guidance is Prescription Drug User Fee Act for Fixed Dose Combination Antiretroviral Drugs for the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. When it comes to the PEPFAR waiver, it only applies to the application fee, and there are some criteria you need to meet. First, it must be a drug for treatment of HIV and comes from the fixed dose guidance list. Secondly, unlike the barrier to innovation waiver, where there is a limited resource requirement, The PEPFAR waiver does not have such requirements, but there are other conditions. You must be only going for a tentative approval. Now, what is a tentative approval? Basically, if the drugs that you are referencing has patents, a firm must wait for the patent to expire, which is usually known as a Paragraph 3 certification. Also, after you receive tentative approval, you must make the PEPFAR drug available to PEPFAR countries at competitive prices. As I mentioned, there is a fixed dose guidance list. It's an attachment B of the fixed dose combination co-packaged drug products and single entity versions of previously approved antiretrovirals for treatment of HIVs. Goodness, all these guidance have very long titles, which I've been repeating, but please note they are available online. One of the things I would like to mention is that in the guidance it states FDA may reevaluate whether a particular fixed combination remain innovative and may find that an application fee waiver is no longer needed. What does that mean? So, when you're reviewing this list of drugs in attachment B, please note that it might not be totally up to date. For example, if FDA evaluates 4 of the same drugs and they are tentatively approved, that might be enough drugs available to the program, which then will mean that drug is no longer necessary and might not qualify for this application fee under the PEPFAR waiver program. Next, I'll be going over PET waivers. This stands for positron emission tomography drug. There is a Federal Registry notice that was published, 65 FR 12999. This was published in March of 2000. This is another type of barrier to innovation. It falls on, and this only applies to application fees, just like the PEPFAR waiver. And just like the PEPFAR waiver, there are certain drugs that only qualify for this waiver. It's three drugs: the FDG-F18 injection, the ammonia N13 injection, and the sodium fluoride F18 injection. Please note, in addition to qualifying, it must be one of these drugs. It must also be specific to the indication. It must include them, which I've listed on this table for your view. So when it comes to the PET waiver, once again, it must be one of the 3 mentioned PET drugs, and it must include the specific indication. And just like the PEPFAR waiver, there is no financial limit, but there are other conditions. So if you submit under this waiver, you must waive the market exclusivity to the PET drugs that you are submitting for. Once again, like I stated, I like tables. It gives you a nice quick snapshot and hopefully most important information that you need to know. For example, I listed the different types of waivers. The small business, it only applies to the application fee. You cannot use it for the program fees. The small business doesn't require a financial requirement, but there are other conditions, such as it must be the first application, it must be less than 500 employees, and you can't have an approved drug product currently being marketed. Hopefully, if you need a quick snapshot to look at this, you could refer back to this table. Now, I'll be going over some of the administrative procedures. Basically, I'll be explaining when, where, and what needs to be submitted to FDA. First thing I'd like to mention is you must submit, or it is requested that actually you submit it 3 to 4 months in advance. The reason why we say 3 to 4 months in advance, because it does take us time to review your request in order to grant or deny it. So when it comes to applications, if you know when you'll be submitting your application, please submit it 3 to 4 months before the application is submitted. When it comes to annual program fees, as I mentioned in previous slides, there are 2 main billing cycles. There's the annual program fee. Usually the payment is due on October 1st. It is recommended you submit it in June. Then there's the cleanup program fee, which is usually due in mid-January, so it is recommended that you submit it in September. This is an illustration. Basically, going over providing a timeline of the annual program fees as that you saw in the previous slide. I bolded the invoice payment due is on October 1st, and I want to emphasize that means you should submit it sometime in June, your request. So that way when October 1st comes around, hopefully your waiver is granted and you won't owe a fee by that time. If you submit it later, we can't guarantee the review of the request, and you might have to pay the fee until it's granted. Where do I submit the information? Well, we prefer that you email it to us, and you email it to cedercollections@fda.hhs.gov. There is a mailing address available, which is available on our PDUFA website. But please do not mail it to us. We prefer that you submit it through email. Next, I'll be going over what to submit. Some of the things are obvious. For example, applicant information. You need to provide us the firm name, address, email address, phone number, pretty much all the contact information in order for us to contact you with. If you're using an agent or representative, please make sure you submit a letter of authorization. If you don't, then we will not contact that agent unless you have given us the right to contact them. And it also provides us the application information, drug name, strengths, and anything else that's pertinent about the drug. Next, identify which type of fee you want waived, either the application fee or the annual program fee. Then please let us know which type of waiver you're requesting and provide us the statutory provision. If you're asking for the public health waiver, please tell us that you're asking for public health under Section 736D1A. For the Barrier to Innovation waiver, that's under 736D1B. For small business, that's under 736D1C. And for orphan, that's under 736K. Also, please note, you must provide us or demonstrate eligibility for the waiver and provide us rationale why you believe you should be granted the waiver. And please list any affiliates that are associated with your company so that way and please identify them. Some of the waivers do have financial requirements. If they do, please provide financial documents, including your affiliates. For example, the public health and the barrier to innovation, they have a $20 million limited resource requirement. So if you can please provide us annual financial reports or other reports that show that you meet the requirements. For orphan exemptions, when it comes to the annual program fee, there is a financial limit of less than $50 million gross worldwide revenue. Please provide a certification that your firm and affiliates make less than $50 million and provide us financial documents. For small businesses, there is a form to fill out. As I mentioned before, it's Form FDA 3971. Some other administrative things to note: when you do email us your request for the small business waiver, please make sure in the subject line it is clearly marked a small business waiver request with the applicant name. Some things I want to mention to you. There are two main email addresses that you should make note of: cedercollections@fda.hhs.gov and do not reply at fda.hhs.gov. You will receive emails from these email addresses. Make sure they are exceptions to your inbox. Otherwise, they might go to your junk or spam folder. So either make them into exceptions or make sure you're checking your junk and spam folder. Another thing to make note of is please update us when your contact information, specifically the email information. If for one reason or another a contact is no longer being used, please let us know and please provide updated information so when we do send out our documentations or information, we send it to the correct email address. Otherwise, it might go to the old email address, and you'll never receive it. Now, this is not directly under my group, but it is additional administrative procedure I do want to make firms aware of because it can affect your annual program fees. Now, for the FDA Reauthorization Act of 2017, there was Section 506I added to the FD&C Act. Basically, this imposes additional marketing status reporting requirements to NDAs and ANDAs. So if you are withdrawing a product from sales, you must notify FDA within 180 days before discontinuing the product. There is a guidance out there that was issued in January 2019, marketing status notifications under Section 506I of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, content and format. It provides a lot more detailed information exactly what to submit, but I'm just letting firms aware there is a statute that requires you to provide FDA information of your marketing status. It must be submitted to your application through the electronic submission gateway system. And if you are withdrawing a product, please prominently display that it's for administrative change and not for available for sale. If you go through the whole process and you are denied your request, there is a reconsideration process. If you disagree, please submit a reconsideration within 30 calendar days to FDA. Provide us the reasons why you disagree and any additional information that supports your arguments. Please send it to cedar@fda.hhs.gov. If for some reason the reconsideration is also denied, there is an appeals process. You should submit it within 30 days of getting the denial of the reconsideration. Please note, when it comes to the appeals process, no new information can be submitted. So if you have any new information or new analysis, it will be downgraded back to a reconsideration process and it'll go through the reconsideration process. Please send any appeals to cedarcollections@fda.hhs.gov and send a copy to CDER Formal Dispute Resolution Project Manager at CDER Formal Dispute Resolution Program at fda.hhs.gov. One thing I do want to mention is that you must submit your request to us, and there is a time bar. If you do not submit your request within 180 days of when the fee is due, your request will not be accepted. That is very important. I've had firms before that have submitted after the 100-day mark, and even though this is a technical administrative procedure, we cannot accept it. So please note, you have 180 days to submit your request after the fee is due. Now, what happens if I fail to pay my fee? When it comes to the application fee, if you don't submit the proper fee, your submission will be considered incomplete and will not be accepted for filing. But when it comes to the annual program fees, that means you'll be put onto the arrears list. Basically, that means you owe us money. And in addition, for any incoming submissions, which includes your affiliates, will be considered incomplete and not accepted for filing. There also are financial penalties that are incurred, and the delinquent debt will be reported to the credit reporting agencies and referred to a debt collection agency. So, what if I have a waiver request that's currently pending? Do I have to pay my invoice? FDA does not grant deferral of user fee based on pending waiver requests. Therefore, all program fees should be paid with regards to pending request of a fee waiver. Basically, we do not take into consideration if your waiver is pending. So when the fee is due, you must pay the fee. Some important dates and reminders that I want to point out again. Once again, when it comes to the annual program fees, please submit your request in June, so there is time to review your request to see if you can be granted or if it will be denied. because the fee. And then in June 30th, please make sure you notify FDA of any and update the product list. If you do not update the product list by June 30th, you will receive an invoice for the product because it's based on June 30th data. Your last chance to update the products list is September 30th. If you do not update it by that time point, you will incur the fee. As I mentioned before, I have had firms who stated that they are discontinuing or no longer marketing the product, but they didn't notify us until after the fiscal year started. Unfortunately, the statute does state that if you are on the product list as of October 1st of that fiscal year, you will be invoiced a program fee. And once again, the annual program fees are usually due on October 1st. Well, that's pretty much most of my presentation, but these are some challenge questions for you to review and look over. First, which waiver can only be used for an application fee? A, PEPFAR, B, small business, C, public health, D, pet, E, A, B, and D. I'll give you a couple seconds to think it over. All right. The answer is A, PEPFAR, small business, and pet. Those are the ones that only apply to application fees. So the answer is E, A, B, and D. If you've been paying attention, hopefully you'll be able to answer the second challenge question. Which waivers have a criteria for a financial limit of $20 million? A, small business, B, public health, C, buried innovation, D, B, and C, or E, all the above. I'll give you a couple seconds again. So the correct answer is public health and buried innovation. So that means it would be B and C. Here are some resources that I've been referring to during my slide. I would like to point out the PDUFA website, the very first link. All the information I provided you in my slides are pretty much available on this website. So please go to this website if you have any questions. There are a lot more details, a lot more information. This is valuable information that are available. It's available to everyone. And for contact information, again, this is available on the PDUFA website, but you may contact us at cedrcollections@fda.hhs.gov, or you could call us at 301-796-7900.